Hi, YouTube.
Hi. Today we're going to talk about race and inequalities.
This is somewhat of a serious subject, but give you a little background. Let me tell you a little story. I came to the United States from China about 28 years ago, and this is right after the LA riots. I still remember seeing Rodney King being beat by the LA cops and the riot that followed, and all the rage and all the emotions and all the upheaval that swept through the LA area. I happened to be in LA not soon after that, and it was something to remember. But then things keep happening. Bad things keep happening to blacks and minorities, right? Fast forward a little bit to 2014 when I was graduating law school. I just started working in New York City, and Eric Garner was killed by New York City cops. And I happened to start work at the Legal Aid Society in New York City. I worked in the as an attorney for the child and represented a lot of minority children. But at the time, it's just one after another, and it's just the raw emotion of the injustice that's happening, both, as far as police brutality goes, and as well as the unseen, but we know that, but the unseen injustice goes on in the court and justice systems. So I got to first look at that. And then beyond that, we had a lot of economic injustice and things that just not right. And I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for us to talk a little bit about our experiences with injustice and inequality, and hopefully we can come up with something that the world, in our worldview, and how we think that things could be better from now on. So obviously this is the most obvious one, and we got Black Lives Matter is finally a message that everybody can adhere to after so many years. And it's difficult because it's been the same thing. Like I said, the same thing has happened for almost the last 30 years, and it just keep happening and happening. I thought that just having the cops caught on camera is going to change something, but does it? It really doesn't. You close your eyes, you can see 1,000 images over and over again of different people being killed for no reason, and that's only the people that got killed. And then that's not to say that the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of black men and women and other minorities being wrongfully treated, put in prison. And when I was in law school, there was the Innocent Project, and I can't believe how many black men are put away for crimes that they didn't commit, and just didn't seem like anybody cared, right? And then there's other injustices. But instead of me talking about it a whole lot, obviously I have my perspectives. Let's talk about your experiences. So what does it mean for you? Like, what kind of emotions does it invoke, and how do you feel seeing what's happening? And then, let's start with that.
Well, let's see. It brings up some raw emotions. Emotions of, I think the rawest emotion is, why are black people treated in such a horrible way in so many different places, honestly? Like, what did black people do to have so many nations have so much negative reaction to black people, African people? I don't understand it. Sometimes I have to think back to like Cain and Abel and wonder, does it start from there? I don't know. But that's like the rawest emotion I have, is why so much hate?
Do you think you have any guesses as to why that's the case?
for the hate that is directed towards African people, African descendants, honestly, I don't know. It's hurtful. It's hurtful to think that, me just walking around somewhere, going somewhere, traveling to another country, that just because of the hue of my skin, I'm going to be hated just because of the hue of my skin is a hard pill to swallow.
Hated? Do you really think that you're hated?
Yes, I think that there are many of people, and I don't think that's the case for everybody. I don't think everybody is a racist. I don't think everybody hates Black people. But for the hate that Black people do get, I can't understand. It's just not warranted. I just don't feel like it's warranted. I don't know where it comes from, why it comes from.
I was talking to somebody this last week about fear that some people have attributed to these negative emotions or hate against Black people based on fear. I can certainly somewhat understand economic fear or other fear, but do you think that, can you accept that fear is a motivator for this hate?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe, as a therapist, I believe that fear is one of the biggest motivating factors that kind of dictates the actions that we take and how we live our lives. And fear is often the thing running in the background that, influences our choices and our decision making. And it's not necessarily a conscious thing. We're not conscious of all of the fears, the underlying fears that we have. But I definitely believe that fear is a huge part of a lot of the choices and the decisions that we make.
So since police brutality is really the, I guess, the catalyst for all this unrest and all these emotions, can you see that maybe a white police officer will be fearful of a Black man that he faces, and that's why he takes more extreme measures because of that fear?
Yeah, I can. And, I can even take that thought and think, way back during slavery in the United States, and, attribute the treatment of Blacks to fear that white people had. Of course, they had legitimate fears about Black people, Black slaves uprising and fighting against them because it happened. And that was always a fear that they have, that, because at one point in certain areas, there were going to be more slaves than there were white people at some points, and more slaves in a household than there were white people. So there was definitely that fear there that was driving a lot of the actions towards Blacks.
But don't you think that maybe that's not really individualized fear now? Is that fear just not bred, but kind of passed down through generations, that it's taught there's a fear against Blacks after they were freed?
Oh yeah, I mean, and ultimately I think that is where, of course, racism is rooted in fear, right? Because when you think about racism, when you think about the definition of racism, it is where one race feels that they are superior than another race, that they are better than, and they, that they are just the much superior, better than race. And so when I think about racism in the United States, I think, there are plenty of white people who are in fear that Black people and minorities in general are going to rise up and take things and just take away from what they have, what their forefathers accumulated, whether it was rightfully accumulated or not. You know, it's theirs and they want to keep it. And so they have that fear that an outsider is going to come in and take what is theirs. So I can understand it. I can understand that fear, of course. But, you know, it's not right. It's not right. It's not, you know, and in my therapy sessions, we talk about fear a lot, and, you know, it's up to the individual to be able to pinpoint what their fears are so that they are not operating out of that fear and within that fear, so that they can make conscious choices about what they want to do with their life. But when we are constantly just being influenced by the underlying fear, the unconscious fear that we have, then we make a lot of choices that are not intentional. They're not well thought out. They're not, you know, we're not choosing necessarily how we want to live our lives. We are just being influenced by fear and by family and by media and all of these things. And we're not really taking the time to sit down and really think about, okay, what's going on inside of me and what do I really want to do about it?
So what about the fear from the other side as a black person? Are you fearful of, well, two parts. One, are you fearful of police?
So I have not personally had an interaction with police where I felt like I feared for my life. One.
I have.
Well, I haven't. I haven't had that interaction. But at the same time, when I see a police officer, my heart starts to jump. If I cross a police officer on the road, my heart jumps. If I see a police officer in my rear view, my heart jumps. If we're walking down the street, taking our walk, and there's a police officer pulling up next to us, my heart jumps. Because I know that it doesn't matter if I'm a good citizen. It doesn't matter if I have no record. It doesn't matter if, you know, I am a professional woman. None of that, I understand that none of that really matters. What the number one thing at this point that, you know, is really going to make a difference is the color of my skin and what they associate the color of my skin with.
Before George Floyd and before the protests, there was an incident that really stuck out to me, and I would like to ask you. Remember when we were driving around looking for a house, and we were doing house hunting in the basically the rich areas, and then we're trying to look for a house, and then there was a little not quite a subdivision, but it was sort of an enclosed street, and I saw a house and I thought we were gonna drive by, and when we got there, you just kept on driving. And I keep telling you, you should just turn in there and just to drive around and look, and you didn't. Remember what you told me?
Yeah, I said I didn't feel like I didn't want to take the risk of driving in there and having to just feel like I had to look over my shoulder or feel insecure about somebody looking out of their window and seeing a black person driving around in their neighborhood and feeling like I didn't belong. And so I felt like I just didn't want to take that risk of the possibility of someone calling the police and then us having to be stopped just because we were driving around in a little neighborhood to look at houses.
Are you afraid that you don't belong, or do you truly feel that you don't belong?
No, it's not even any of those two things. It's just the fact that I just didn't feel like us going and driving around and looking would have been worth the inconvenience of possibly being stopped by the police. It wasn't necessarily that I felt like if the police were to come, then I would lose my life at that point. It didn't get to that level, but it was to the level where I felt like, oh, I could, somebody could definitely call the police and say a black person was driving around and they looked suspicious, and then we would get stopped. And I just didn't feel like it was worth it. And, you know, that's a part of how I'm impacted, you know, because of the way Black people are viewed in this country. And I remember when we got home, I think I waited until we got home for me to tell you how I was really feeling about that. And I told you that, you know, there have been other times when I felt that way, but I never really said anything about it. And I asked you if you knew that I felt that way.
I never knew you felt that way.
Mm.
I mean, I always felt like once we kind of made it, we bought a house in the right areas, and we're professionals, and we've gone to good schools, and we have good careers, and we are not necessarily going to be, I guess, stereotyped based on socioeconomic factors as being someone that's suspicious, but I guess race, I don't know why. I just, like I said, this was before before the current situations, and I just didn't see you feel that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and you know, even sometimes like the thought crosses my mind because, you know, our car, I drive an electric BMW, and there are times when the thought crosses my mind like, am I going to get profiled and pulled over because are they going to think that it's not my car? And if they, you know, run the plates, it's going to come back with a Chinese last name, and they're going to see a Black woman driving the car. Like, are they going to pull me over because they think I stole the car? And then not just that, but then I think about Taya when she's driving the car. You know, is she going to get profiled? Is she going to get pulled over just because they think she doesn't belong in that car? So, you know, these thoughts, they cross my mind a lot. I don't share them with you a lot because I don't carry them with me all of the time, and I don't stay stuck in those feelings. They are thoughts that come to my mind, and then, you know, I'm just like, okay, well, you know, if it happens, then it happens, and, you know, I'm not gonna stay fearful about possibly being pulled over.
We are a little bit different. Like, even nowadays, I still feel like I get discriminated a lot, but decisively there's a difference. It's that I think the kind of discrimination that I face is more economic and other in nature. I never really, at least up here in the Philadelphia area, never really feared for any physical harm that would result from discrimination. I did down in South Carolina. I got stopped. I got stopped in South Carolina by actually state police in South Carolina. This was a while ago, and then that was about 20 years ago, and 10 years ago in Georgia, no, in Alabama. And those are not pleasant experiences as someone who is from the north and who doesn't look like it would belong. And I remember when I got stopped, even though I'm Asian, right? I look Asian, but I had cornrows and I had tattoos, and I was driving a blacked out BMW, and the cops they literally had me take apart my car and told me that if I wasn't going to comply, they were going to get some dogs there, and then they'll make sure that I comply because the dogs will do whatever they say the dogs will do. They actually said that to me. And this is before I went to law school and became a lawyer. So I feel like after I became a lawyer, I know we live in the Northeast, and I feel a little bit more comfortable and faith in the justice system. It's not that I have faith it's fair. I just feel like, at least, I guess that's my privilege, is to at least believe that I will not be put away. I will actually have a chance to explain myself, and I believe enough in what I can do in the system to actually not lose my life over. But maybe due to the recent events, I should rethink that position a bit more, and I have been too. That's why inequality just it applies to different people in different ways. Yeah. And I think maybe as a Black woman, especially that, not because where we live and what we do and the kind of area we're in, you don't feel as fearful for that.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we're still, you and I, different ways, but we still feel it treated in not equally.
Right. I mean, there are times when, like I go to, we live in the county, so if I go across the street, that's Philadelphia County. So there's a hair store over there, right? And so I don't even really honestly feel comfortable going into that store, just because as a black woman, I walk in there, and as soon as I walk in there, there's people looking, and I go down the aisle, somebody is coming down the aisle after me. And so it's not a comfortable situation. I'm married to a Chinese man. So it's not as if I feel like everybody is racist, or all Asians are racist, but I feel it. I notice it. I walk into the store and they're looking. So it's not a comfortable feeling to have when you want to go into a store and you're spending your money. And there's always been situations like that where I know that no matter how many degrees I have, no matter how much money I have, no matter any of that stuff, as long as there are, there is a racist majority in a country, in a town, wherever, then it's gonna feel that way. It's gonna feel very unequal, very uncomfortable.
So obviously, you skip that part. The people in the hair store are Asian, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
We're gonna have to have a whole other talk about Asian and Black relations, because I feel discriminated by Blacks quite a bit, and I express that to you.
Yeah.
But I never take it. You tell me not to take it personal. I don't take it personal, and I don't think it's malicious. It has a lot to do with the positions that the different groups are put in, because you and I met, and we're obviously of different races, but we found much in common in personalities, in life and stuff. So I think if Asians and Blacks were put into the right environment to get to know each other and to communicate, and that will be productive, and they can get along. But there's a lot of misunderstanding, cultural and otherwise, and also they're pitted against each other, and there's more reason for that. So we'll talk about that in the future. What we don't have here is that, because I'm not white, and we don't quite have that dynamic, and I think that's hard to the black and white divide in this country is difficult to traverse, largely because of we said earlier, the fear. Yeah. There's fear on both sides, and how do you even overcome or start to overcome that fear? Yeah. So then, with the fears on both sides, I think even through our own experiences, it's pretty clear that no matter how far you get in life, you still have to face these inequalities and these fears, and you still don't really know what's going to happen, right? The defenders of police tactics, we've been around for long enough for people to say, well, black people commit more crimes. The crime statistics supports racial profiling, and then in Philadelphia, we still have stop and frisk, which basically means if you look suspicious, meaning if you look black, and the police can stop and frisk you to see if you have a weapon, and many times they find a weapon, so that further justifies the fear and then the tactic being used. So how do we get beyond that? I'm putting you on the spot. I know you don't necessarily have the solution, but we got to start thinking about how do we get beyond that. Because we can get rid of all the police, and then the next batch of police will come, and they will fall pretty quickly into the same pattern, because the same reality is still faced, that there's the mistrust and fear between both sides, and there will just be different ways. Mm-hmm. So how do we get beyond the fear?
Well, I can start off with, so me personally, I choose not to let hate take over my heart, because you can't fight hate with hate. That's not going to get us anywhere. That's going to make situations worse. I also don't believe that we should, two wrongs don't make a right. And so I don't feel as though we should, I guess, do the same thing to other people as they have done to us. We shouldn't treat white people the same way that they have treated black people. Just because, number one, that would be a lot of stereotyping and generalizing and, putting all of white people into one category. And that is what we don't want them to do to us. So I definitely don't think that is the answer. I think we have to take the time to learn about each other, to talk, like you said, to talk to each other, to get to know each other, to feel like we're not so far removed from each other. Because the closer in proximity you are to something or to someone, then the more empathy and sympathy and understanding you can have for that person or for that situation. So I guess that's one thing, is proximity, and having people come together more often and learn about each other more often, learn about cultures, learn about their social norms, learn about their families and their plights. And, there is oftentimes a lot more differences within a race than outside of a race. Because I guarantee that within the black race and within the white race, you're going to find a lot of people who have, like, an uncle who has some issues, or a grandmom who is tough, or, there's just going to be a lot of similar personality types across races and cultures and countries and different things like that. So, the more we get to know each other and the closer in proximity we can get to each other, the less of a divide and misunderstanding there will be. So how do you think we can kind of start to squash some of that fear?
I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been thinking about this since a long time ago. Pretty much since I saw Rodney King. And then later on I worked at federal court for a little bit, and I had worked on this case where there's a state trooper that beat up a minority woman just for getting in his face. There was absolutely no reason from what I can see. But then I start to, from that point on, like, I can't believe people act that way towards other people. And I refuse to think that white people are all evil, even though sometimes the temptation is there to say so. But that's not what we want people to say about us, about you, about anyone. So everyone should fight that temptation. And to say that all police are evil is the same. Even sometimes it feels that way. I don't want to go down that road, because that's just hate, and you don't fight hate with hate. And so I started thinking why that these situations happen. And I think a lot of times is because we put people have faults. You have faults. I have faults. We put imperfect people with faults in these adversarial life and death situations on either side, and they have to make really quick decisions, and fear takes over. And so when we were growing up, and even when I was growing up, we always played these games as boys, the cops and robbers, right? There's cops and robbers, and we you watch cartoons, and it's always the same. There's adversarial situations, there's violence involved, there's life and death involved. And if you want to be a cop, then you got to pursue the robbers and with guns and knives, and sometimes you kill them. And Cops, the show was canceled by Fox finally. I don't know if you read, and apparently there was some detailed study that the suspects on the show were disproportionately black, even though that really shouldn't be the case. So when we grow up in a media intensive society where most of the bad things are portrayed as black, black coats, dark clothing, black people, black skin, black everything, then when you put imperfect human beings in these situations, an adversarial situation with someone who they have to immediately quickly identify as a threat to your own life, and I think fear will say that when you see a black person that's either running at you or away from you, maybe it's easy to see them as a threat. The threshold, so as a lawyer, I understand that the threshold for using deadly force is that you have to fear for your own life. And of course, the police frequently say that they feel fearful for their lives, even though the situation doesn't cause for it. In the case I mentioned, it's basically a 250-pound cop felt that he and his partner felt that a 110-pound little female was threatening their life, and they were fearful, so they had to beat her down. I just don't understand how people feel that way, but then I've never been in that situation either. So if we're trying to not continuously perpetuate a cycle of fear and hate, then maybe we should not put people in that situation. I don't know how that could be done, but that's how I always feel. So maybe have people try to understand each other first, instead of training them to face every suspect, every situation as a fearful and dangerous one. Of course, a police officer will disagree with me on that point, but it's easy for me to say, sitting here, they have to face real life in those situations, but I don't think they should be trained to always treat everyone they come across as a threat to them, to their lives. So when the system is broken and you put a not broken person in a system, they're going to become an extension of the broken system and therefore are broken as well. And that's something that needs to be fixed. The system needs to be fixed and changed and transformed. So that's a lot of work to be done, and I'm not sure that I'm qualified enough to know how to fix it, but all I know is that something needs to be fixed, because in the inequality that we face every day, it's just not acceptable in this day and age. No one should die, no one should lose a job, no one should lose their liberty, no one should lose anything because of a broken system. And I'm glad that more people are seeing that the system's broken. So let's hope that we can work forward and come up with a system that's not broken. That's better. But the police is only the first step. There's many other broken system out there, from education to career, to work, to taxes, to everything. So, and then our political system too, as well. So I guess we'll be talking about those things in the future. We don't have all the answers. We probably don't have any answers, but what we do is we have the desire for change, and we're trying to do our part to change the world for the better. I'm talking a lot. As a matter of fact, I've sort of made a point to focus on everything I'm doing and try to do it in a way that we can reduce inequality and, change things for the better.
Yeah, and so right now, I think the biggest thing that I'm doing is providing counseling for women of color, for Black women and women of color, who, of course, right now are experiencing so many different feelings, personal feelings, and then having to navigate the workspace with a lot of white counterparts, and it's difficult for them. So I have been able to provide some extra support for them, and I feel very privileged to be able to do that, and very proud that I am able to do that work. So that is how I am kind of doing my part at this time.
Let's all heal and work together to change tomorrow. And I'm sure we'll talk many more times on similar subjects.
Yeah.
And I look forward to this.
Mhm.
Well, once again, we talked on the difficult subject of race and inequality. I'm sure we'll talk more in the future. And we welcome your feedback.
Yep.
And because only when we all participate in this conversation, we can make meaningful change.
Yeah. Yeah.
So until next time.
All right. Bye.
See you later.